Britain has a long history stretching back thousands of years. In every part, at some point, a bloody or mysterious event has taken place. Murders, bloodthirsty revenge, plagues, punishment and folklore will make your flesh creep in terror. This is Mysterious Britain, Tales of the Unknown. Money, as the saying goes, is the root of all evil. It has caused many disputes amongst families, and at times has resulted in murder, as was the case of Thomas Elks. In the 17th century, the Elks family were well known within the village of Knockin, Shropshire, for their criminal acts. Though family members would settle down to a lawful life, the family's criminal traits re-emerged in Thomas, the younger of two brothers. Thomas's older brother had married and soon after had a son, but both father and mother would die soon of a strange sickness that swept over the area. The baby was taken in by the grandmother, Thomas's mother, and raised as the heir apparent to the family's small wealth. It was well known that Thomas was beloved by his mother, more so than any of her other children, and gave him money to fund his reckless spending on ungodly indulgences. With the family's wealth being drained, the grandmother told Thomas that she would no longer fund his lifestyle. Thomas took this news badly, and now saw that his nephew, who was now 5 years old, stood between him and an inheritance. Thus he began to plot. Thomas gave a poor boy from the village a few coins to entice his nephew into a nearby cornfield, which had now grown to its full height, on the pretence of looking for flowers. Thomas met the two children and told the poor boy to go back to the village. He then snatched his nephew and took him over to the lower end of the field, where he had prepared a pail of water. Without mercy, Thomas dunked his nephew's head under the water, drowning him and leaving his corpse in the field. When the boy didn't return home that evening, a search was conducted and the body discovered. The poor village boy that Thomas had paid revealed what he knew, and a neighbour alerted the authorities that they had seen him fleeing on the road towards London. 2 men were sent after him, and as they neared Mimes in Herefordshire, they saw 2 ravens sitting on a cock of hay, pulling the hay with their beaks and making a hideous noise. The 2 men went over to the hay for a closer look, and there found Thomas hiding. He was in a fit of madness, and claimed that the ravens had chased and tormented him since the murder. Thomas was taken back to Shrewsbury, where he was tried and found guilty of murder. For his crime, Thomas was hanged in chains on Knockin Heath, where upon the branch where his chains were hung perched 2 ravens. Sawney Bean is a legendary figure, said to have been the head of a 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century, that murdered and cannibalised over 1,000 people in 25 years. His father was a ditch digger and hedge trimmer. Although Bean tried to take up the family trade, he quickly realised that he was not fit for the work. Bean left home with an allegedly vicious woman named Black Agnes Douglas, who shared his odd tendencies and was herself accused of being a witch. After some robbing and the cannibalisation of one of their victims, the couple ended up at the coastal cave in Bennyhead. The cave was 180 metres deep, and the entrance was blocked by water during high tide, enabling the couple to live there undiscovered for some 25 years. The pair produced 6 daughters, 8 sons, 14 granddaughters and 18 grandsons. The grandchildren were said to be the products of incest between their children. Lacking the inclination for regular work, the Bean clan thrived by laying careful ambushes at night to rob and murder individuals or small groups. They brought the bodies back to their cave, where the corpses were then dismembered and eaten. They would pickle the leftovers and discard body parts in barrels. These leftovers would sometimes wash up on nearby beaches. This strategy helped conceal their crimes by leading villagers to believe that animals were responsible for the attacks on travellers. The body parts and disappearances did not go unnoticed, but the clan stayed in their cave by day and took their victims at night. Thus the villagers remained for a time unaware of the murderers living nearby. Once local people began to take notice of the disappearances, searches were launched to find the culprits. One such took note of the cave, but the searchers did not believe any humans could live in it. Frustrated and desperate for justice, the townspeople hanged several innocents, but the disappearances continued. Suspicion often fell on local innkeepers, since, in many cases, they were the last known to have seen the missing people. One night, the Bean clan ambushed a married couple riding from a fair on one horse. The man, trained in combat and armed with a sword and pistol, was able to hold the clan off. The unfortunate wife was unhorsed, fell to the ground and was captured, meeting a hideous fate. The husband was rescued when a large group of fairgoers appeared on the trail and the Beans fled. He was taken to the local magistrate, who was then informed of the events. With the Beans' existence revealed, it was not long before the king heard of the atrocities and led a posse of 400 men and several bloodhounds. The bloodhounds soon led them to the previously overlooked cave. Upon entering it by torchlight, the searchers found the Bean clan surrounded by human remains, body parts hanging from the walls, barrels filled with limbs, and piles of stolen heirlooms and jewellery. There are two versions of the events which followed the Beans' discovery. The more common is that the clan was captured alive, having given up without a fight. They were then taken in chains to Tolbooth Jail in Edinburgh and transferred to either Leith or Glasgow, where they were executed, being regarded as subhuman and unfit for trial. Sawney and the other men had their genitalia cut off and thrown into the fires. Their hands and feet were severed, and they were allowed to bleed to death. Sawney shouted in his dying words, "It isn't over, it will never be over." After watching the men die, Agnes and the other women and the children were then tied to stakes and burned alive. The second version is that the search party detonated gunpowder at the entrance of their cave, leaving the Bean clan to suffocate. The Braham seer, known in his native Scottish Gaelic as Dark Kenneth and Kenneth Mackenzie, was, according to legend, a predictor of the future who lived in 17th century Scotland. Thus, he had been dubbed as the Gaelic Nostradamus. Mackenzie is thought to have come from Lewis on lands owned by the Seaforths, and to have been of the clan Mackenzie, although both these details are in themselves questioned. He is better known, however, for his connections with Braham Castle near Digwall and the Black Isle in Easter Ross. He is thought to have used an adder stone, a stone with a hole in the middle, to see his visions. The Braham seer worked for the 3rd Earl of Seaworth. As with Nostradamus, most of his prophecies are best known in translation, which can in itself be deceptive. However, there are no contemporary manuscripts or accounts of his predictions, so it is impossible to verify them. He is claimed to have prophesied, or his prophecies have been interpreted as referring to the Battle of Culloden, the Highland clearances, the building of the Caledonian Canal, the discovery of the North Sea oil, and even Margaret Thatcher. Having become famous as a diviner and wit, he was invited to the Seaworth territory in the east to work as a labourer at Brahan Castle near Digwall, in what is now the county of Easter Ross, where he met his downfall. This move led to an unfortunate, unforeseen sequence of events on the seer's part, leading to his barbaric murder at Charnery Point, where he was allegedly burned in a spiked tar barrel on the command of the Earl's wife, Lady Seaworth. The simple prediction that led to his downfall, that the absent Earl of Seaworth was having sexual adventures with one or more women in Paris, seems likely, but of course was highly outrageous to Lady Seaworth, as it cast her husband in a scandalous light and heaped embarrassment on her. Thus the Brahan seer met his end.